Hello, I'm Ricky, and this is with the Spring Hill Soul Searchers. We're here today on one of our nicer afternoons that we've had here in Spring Hill, Tennessee since a terrible winter of ice and storms, and finally have a nice day. We happen to be located here at the Spring Hill battlefield during the Civil War, and of course I have our crew here with us. And to my right is...
I'm Andy Johnson. I'm an editor and investigator.
And I'm Brian Garza, and I'm one of the investigators also.
And we also have one of our new members, Josh, who is our camera guy.
Hello.
And I hope you guys stay tuned for more presentations of local history and paranormal events. Well, here we are at the Spring Hill battlefield, and we have our guests today, which is Mark and Alan. They have both been residents here in Spring Hill for over 25 years. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do in regards to history and why we're here?
Basically, what my son and I do is we're actually amateur Civil War historians, where we actually study Civil War battles, and we go basically to different parts of battlefields, and we try to recover all the artifacts that we can. And then we clean them up and actually preserve them for folks to actually enjoy looking at them
and hearing the stories of the history.
Exactly.
That's great. So what is this particular battlefield, this area? How is it special to you?
This battlefield here is basically probably the most special battlefield of all the Civil War, at least to me, and I've been to many of them. I'm actually a reenactor. With 8th Tennessee, so my son is too. But this field here is actually the turning point of the Civil War. What happened here in Spring Hill could have been either make or break for the Confederacy. Unfortunately, it didn't turn out the way it should have, but they got by us. And so this field here was basically the last stand of the Civil War, because as everyone knows, from here they went to Franklin, where it pretty much destroyed the Army of Tennessee.
Well, we're going to be very anxious to see the items that you've brought to us and the stories that you have about this particular battlefield. So thank you so much for both coming.
We're with Mark and Alan right now, and if you could explain to us some of the items that we have in front of us from the Civil War that have been found out here.
Yeah. Basically, these are actually the real cannonballs that were fired on November 29th, 1864. Over in the Home Depot is actually where the Ohio 1st actually fired these. They actually fired 166 of these cannonballs. These are actually completed cannonballs that have been redone. They're completed.
Like they've been cleaned up?
Cleaned up, okay. Exactly. These are what they look like when we find them. Obviously, we dig them, and they're between 6 and 10 inches in the ground. A lot of people say that this battle was just a skirmish, but it was not a skirmish. If you can imagine the Predator Arena, that's how many people were out in these fields out here marching and fighting. So it was definitely not a skirmish. It was a major battle. So obviously these are just a few of the cannonball fragments.
What is this here?
This is actually a bridle that a farmer gave us. This is actually a captured federal bridle. And if you see here, this is actually a rosé, and it's turned upside down. The Confederacy did not have a lot of equipment, and the equipment they did have, they went ahead and flipped the U.S. upside down. Now it's Southern nations. So that's how they use that. This item here is actually a carrying case that actually officers carry their maps and different important paperwork. Moving down here, this is one of my favorite pieces. The Ohio 64th was here. And the reason why this place is so important is Ohio, Michigan, Illinois, Alabama. When they fought this battle here, the Tennessee boys were coming home. The Army of Tennessee that fought here was like the SEALs of today. There was 32,000 of them. They had fought 3 years. They were the baddest of the bad. And so this is actually Ohio insignia that went on their actually hat. This is a nice piece.
Wow. And you found that here?
Yes.
Right here?
Actually, my son did. Actually, he found it right over by them 2 trees over there. These items here, these were not dug. These are actually just period forks and knives. This is how you would eat. Not very appealing, very small.
So the soldiers would actually carry these utensils
Yes,
with them? Okay.
yes, that would be actually this. This could have been very well a battle knife. The Confederates used anything makeshift they could. This is actually a battle knife that we dug. As you can see, it's been rotted, but it's been sealed. Confederates carried a lot of these types of items for hand-to-hand combat.
Because they had no funding, really. It was just kind of
Exactly.
whatever you can get your hands on.
Whatever you can get your hands on. These are actually rifle tools. The federal government gave their folks these types of tools. This was actually to repair their muskets, because these muskets came loose. You had to tighten them up all the time. These were actually dug out in this battlefield. This here is one of my favorite pieces. When the Yankees were running down 31, they were clanging, and it was very early in the morning, and they were afraid they're going to get caught. They had done a very slick thing anyways by passing the Confederacy. So when they got down right outside of town, the generals told them to start throwing the pans off because we're going to get caught because they're clanging too much. This happens to be one of those pans. They dug it about 20 inches deep. It has been sealed, and that's all that's left of it.
So you've pretty much just, your whole life is pretty much wrapped around this period in time. You know so much about it. So when you come across pieces like this, do you automatically know what you've got in your hand, or do you have to like look at it and do a little research, or do you?
Very little. I've been researching it for 25 years. I read. My wife, I'm probably driving her crazy. I've got probably about 400 books on the Civil War.
That's amazing.
It's my passion. Very much like this field's my passion out here. This field, I can't even explain how passionate I am about this field.
So in these cases, you've got mostly, it looks like bullets.
Correct. These bullets are,
Have all of these been found here?
yes.
Every single one of them?
Every one of these bullets
Wow.
have been found here. Now I have other bullets that my son does a very, very good job of placing everything in order. He knows exactly where the bullets are from Franklin, Spring Hill. I have stayed pretty much around Middle Tennessee my whole life, trying to recover as much relics as I can from actually our local home. These are actually pocket knives that they carried. This is all that's left of them.
Wow.
That was one thing that was standard for federal Army guys. They would get one of these knives. The Confederacy did not. That is actually a real bayonet and it was used in the Civil War, but it was not dug here.
How many soldiers would you say fought in this general area right here? You know, and maybe how many you think died on this battlefield?
19,662 came across this field. There was several fields they crossed. They crossed across the road. They went down Carter's Creek Pike. They went down 431. They came down through Kedron. There was a total of roughly 32,000 Confederates. The Federals were outnumbered. They estimated between 13 and 16,000. So they were very much on the defensive. They were trying to get to Franklin, where they had other reserves there. Obviously, once they got to Franklin, their troops ended up being 35,000. But this was the last place the Confederates spent the night before they went to the Battle of Franklin. For 7,000 of them, it was the last night on Earth.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about this rifle that you've brought?
This is actually, as I said, I'm a reenactor, so is my son. This here is a 52 Enfield. This is actually the exact gun that they used in the Civil War. They either used a 63 Richmond or used an Enfield. Later on in the war, they used a Sharps repeating caliber. That's what won the war for the Federals, because they were repeating rifles. They could actually shoot up to 5 bullets. This one here, you'd have to actually, if you were very good at it, you could load 3 rounds per minute. This particular one is exactly built the exact same way it was in the war.
So a real big disadvantage from the other troops when they can shoot 5 rounds and you only
Exactly.
1.
This weighed 9.5 pounds, and can you imagine carrying that all day long?
Wow,
It gets very tiresome.
it does.
Yeah.
Mark, you were telling me earlier about that particular item, and I'd really like you to tell the story behind that.
This here is probably off of a 52 Enfield. Could have been off of a Richmond. We don't know. Actually, the markings are actually with a rust. My son found this out here, and this is the most special piece that we found out here. It doesn't look much, but if you look the way the hammer is cocked, this is what you call make to the ready. the reason why this is such a special piece is when you are a soldier, you actually have black powder in here, you load your bullet up, and the only time that you're able to fire is when your commander says make to the ready. When you make to the ready, you pull your hammer back. Then he's going to tell you aim, and then you're going to aim at your target. As you see with the lock plate being this way, it's the last thing you do. And if you look at this, the same thing here, this soldier was ready to fire. Unfortunately, he didn't get his fire off. So either he got wounded or he got killed before he was able to get his shot. So this one's kind of heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mark, you're going to kind of take us on a little bit of a tour here of the field and tell us some stories specifically that took place during the battle and some of the experiences that you've had as well.
All right, well, the area we're walking in right now was all wooded at the time. This was actually, the Yankees were actually pushed back into this area. The area we're walking to a little later on, I'll show you, but right here was actually the defense that the Federals got pushed back on November 29th. This is where they made their stand. It was very late at night. It was probably around 6 o'clock, 5 to 6 o'clock, and as you know, in November, it got dark very quick. The Confederates were pushing. Stanley was firing cannonballs over here off of what they call Weaver Hill, which is now Home Depot. And he had 10 cannons there. He had 6 3-pounders, I believe it was, or 3-inch guns, excuse me, and 2 Napoleons. He kept that fire up. He fired over 166 cannonballs. And what that did is it kept the Confederates at bay long enough so that the Federals could actually get into the woods and to hide, and they pushed back so they could get back into the reserves. There was actually reserve units back here. Now this area here is actually, I wouldn't want to say it's the main part of the battlefield, it's the very back of the battlefield. As you know, the battlefield went from Ripley all the way to Duplex Road, all the way to Kedron, all the way to Saturn Parkway. That was the entire battlefield, including, of course, the crossings and across the street on 31. This particular area was actually wooded at the time. Bradley's division, which was a Federal unit, was back in here. They were being pushed back very late at night. The Confederates were coming from actually that direction there. I'm trying to think exactly which way it worked, but Claiborne, I'll think of them. Anyways, long story short, there was 4 divisions coming in all in one direction. They were closing in on the Federals. The Federals had nowhere to go. Even though the artillery was blazing, like I said earlier, they fired 166 rounds at them. It wasn't stopping them, it was holding them off. And so the only thing that stopped it from happening is the generals of the Confederacy got their orders wrong. Forrest had done a great job throughout the whole day. He kept on attacking from different directions. So the Federals didn't know exactly where the Confederates were coming from. So they were really freaked out at that time. They're like, well, we don't know where Hood's going to show up at. Well, Hood ended up showing up way down here, and actually about a mile down here, and came forward with 19,000 troops. They assumed at one time they had a few divisions ahead of the main forces. They thought that was it. And then when they saw the 19,000, they actually had a brass band, and they had their flags flying. So it looked like Gettysburg through here. And Stanley at that time, he didn't know what to do. He said, we're cooked.
And you're saying that all of that was more wooded than it is now?
Actually, it was wooded, and then there was cornfields going to the south. And over in this area, it was wooded. And then this is the only thing that saved the Federals was the woods. And it was turning dark. Once it got nighttime, the Confederates didn't know exactly what to do, so they went back and asked Hood. Well, Hood was at Oaklawn, which was actually 3 miles from here, actually 2.5 miles from here. So the time they got the orders from him, they couldn't just actually call him up on a cell phone and say, hey, what do you want to do here? Right. They went back. Well, Hood thought he was having a good time at Oaklawn. He was having a regular dinner with the family, and eating high on the hog while his men were out here eating squalor and beans. And so when he went to bed at 9 o'clock that night, he thought things were good. It was a done deal. We've got him. Well, that wasn't the case. Schofield actually came out of Columbia around 7 o'clock at night, and he marched the 64th Ohio, the 40th Missouri, I believe it was the 37th Illinois. And there's a funny story about the Missourians, but I won't say what that was. But
Okay.